Welcome to the Research Culture Uncovered podcast, where in every episode we explore what is research culture and what should it be. You'll hear thoughts and opinions from a range of contributors to help you change research culture into what you want it to be.
Hi, it's Nick. And for those who don't know me yet, I'm Open Research Advisor based in the library here at the University of Leeds. You're joining us in Season 3 of the Research Culture Uncovered podcast. We'll be speaking to colleagues from both the University of Leeds and from other universities and organisations about open research, what it is, how it's practiced in different disciplines, and how it relates to research culture. If you haven't already, you can catch up with Season 1, which was an introduction to the podcast and to my co-hosts, and Season 2 with my colleague Tony Bromley, who was in conversation with a number of presenters from the REDS Conference of 2022. That's the Researcher Education and Development Scholarship International Conference held here in Leeds. But now I'd like to introduce my guest for today, my colleague Kelly Lloyd. Kelly is currently completing an ESRC-funded PhD in the Leeds Institute of Health Sciences on the topic of investigating decision-making in cancer preventative therapy. Kelly is also one of the organisers of the ReproducibiliTea Journal Club here at Leeds, which is how I first met you, I think.
Yes, it was.
Kelly. So welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And thank you for taking time out. I think you've been a bit busy lately.
I have been a bit busy, to say the least.
So the question is, have you finished your thesis yet?
Yes, so I'm a final year PhD student, and I'm happy to report that I submitted my PhD thesis last Thursday.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
So what happens next? I'm not having a PhD myself. I'm not totally sure you get a...
Yeah, so there are more steps. So quite a few friends have asked me, do you feel relieved? And in many ways, no, because it's not done yet. So my next stop is I'll do a viva defence. So that will be end of February, where I'll have an exam with an internal and external examiner who are going to go through my thesis, and I need to defend it, essentially. And then I'll find out then if I passed and I'm a doctor, and if I need to do corrections, and if they're major or minor. So yes, it's not over yet.
Okay, well, good luck with that.
Thank you.
Are you nervous about the defence or?
Yes,
yeah.
but I'm sure it'll be fine.
Okay, yeah, well, good luck with that. I mean, as I say, I think I met you through the ReproducibiliTea Journal Club. We'll come on to that in a bit more detail perhaps as we go. But through reproducibility, and certainly from you personally, Kelly, I've learned an awful lot about open research in general and pre-registration in particular. Again, we'll come on to, I think, pre-registration, what that is, and you can explain that to us in a little bit more detail. But perhaps could start by talking about how and why you became interested in open research, perhaps with reference to your background, your academic background. And,
yes, so my origin story.
Yeah, your origin story. Quite. You're a superhero. You're casting yourself as a superhero.
Well, I was going to say in open research, but not quite. I'm enthusiastic. So how to start it? So my background is my undergraduate degree was in psychology, but I didn't learn about open research then. It was actually when I was doing my master's in social research. So to give a bit of context, I was doing a 1+3 master's and PhD. So I got funding for the PhD, but they also provided funding for me to do a master's at first. And for this master's, I still had contact with my PhD supervisor. And I had an assignment for my master's where I had to review a book and critique it and discuss the book for this essay. And my supervisor wanted me to read Chris Chambers' book, The 7 Deadly Sins of Psychology, which I found fascinating. I've never heard of open research or open science before. And this was like my first introduction to it. And I just thought it was so interesting. Have you read it?
I've read parts of it. I confess I haven't read the whole thing.
Oh, read it all. I loved it. And so, from there, I was really interested in open research. Just from reading that book, I learned a lot. So I will say about the book, it's called The 7 Deadly Sins of Psychology, but don't let the title put you off. I think it really can, a lot of it, be applied to so many disciplines. It's just that Chris Chambers himself is from a psychology background. So it's definitely applicable to a lot of disciplines. And it was from there that I got interested. And then I got asked to help set up Leeds ReproducibiliTea.
But I mean, you say that I'm aware of the book and of Chris Chambers, but He's a psychologist, and you started with psychology. I mean, there seems to be an awful lot of psychologists leading the charge for open research. Why do you think that is? Is there a particular reason for that, or is it?
I think the reason is, so yes, open science, a lot of the discussions came, at least the movement, how it sort of is at the moment, a lot of that came from psychology. And I think a big part of that was just because a lot of psychology studies, really landmark studies that were really important in a discipline, people tried to replicate them and they couldn't be replicated. So it became this big thing that psychology can't be replicated, and what are the issues, and that sort of bred into the discussions of open science. But I mean, it's not just psychology. I think there is a perception it's just psychology. It's not. And there are other disciplines, that science disciplines, I guess, because it's been replicated. So there's other scientific disciplines that have tried to replicate landmark studies and also haven't been able to do it. So in cancer biology, so there was a big replication project for cancer biology, and they tried to replicate a bunch of landmark cancer biology studies. And they found that, firstly, it was really hard because there wasn't enough detail in the methods. Like there wasn't openly shared protocols, there's a lot of detail missing, a lot of data wasn't shared. And when they could replicate it, more often than not, they did not find the same results. So it really is applicable to a lot of disciplines. I just think it needs to be sort of communicated from the key people in those disciplines. And it's just at the moment, psychologists have been the ones mostly talking about it. So I think researchers from other disciplines, but they think, oh, that's not to do with me because there's a psychologist talking about it.
Yeah, and I mean, in the context of cancer biology, I mean, that really brings it home, doesn't it? Because that's important. I mean, medicine, well, it's important in all sorts of disciplines, but
medicine is really,
obviously, you want to go to the doctor and know that
the treatment
the
works.
treatment is based on studies that can be replicated.
It is much more scandalous in medical research when these things can't be replicated, or where conflicts of interest have resulted in things, maybe selective reporting, and
Well, we'll come perhaps onto some of those specific examples, but you've talked about reproducibility already, and the concept of replicating research results. But I mean, how would you define open research in your fields? I guess you've got more than one field with your
background. So I have forgot to mention that my actual field now, as you mentioned earlier, is Leeds Institute of Health Sciences. So now I'm in much more of a health research, applied health research background. So I guess open research means to me about having the whole cycle of research as open as possible. But I also really appreciate that it can't always be completely open. So I, for example, do a lot of qualitative research, and that can be quite tricky because you could release the interview data, for example, but then maybe the participants be identified, and you've got to make sure the best interests of participants are there and their ethics are respected. And maybe then you would redact a lot of the identifiable data from your interview transcript and then share it. And then you might redact so much information that the interview transcript is basically useless. And there is no point sharing it in the first place. So it can be quite complicated. But you mentioned one medicine as well.
Well, yeah, but just on that, because we did actually work with you on a data set, didn't you?
Yes.
And you, in that case, as I recall, you didn't show all the transcripts, is that right?
So I did, for one of my PhD studies, it's a qualitative study, and I recruited patients with a particular genetic condition and healthcare professionals across different professions, such as pharmacists, GPs, and genetic counsellors. And I didn't share all the transcripts. So, for example, pharmacists, I only recruited 4 pharmacists, and quite a few recruited from social media, where it could have been obvious who they were, basically. So I thought, for safety, I'm not going to include these really small groups. So I only shared data from people with Lynch syndrome and GPs who consented to their data being shared. And I went through all the transcripts and redacted anything that could be identifiable. And I think,
even though you had permission, so they'd given their consent, but there's still an ethical consideration there.
I guess maybe how I phrased it, because I said, that the interview transcripts would be in a restricted access repository and that people won't be able to identify them because I'm going to remove identifiable information. So that's what they consented to. I guess you could do it where they consent to something different.
Yeah. No, I'm just interested because, we've talked about this. It is an issue, I think, especially in qualitative research, making sure that the ethics is watertight and you're actually showing what you can, etc.
And I wonder if I redacted so much data and identifiable information, as I mentioned earlier, did I make my interview transcripts that I shared essentially kind of useless? Because there's just so much important data I took out, potentially.
So that's data sharing as part of open research or open science. You mentioned methodology and the fact that that's not always sufficient. Is that a big issue in?
Yes, it is quite a big issue in lots of disciplines. So the fact that when you submit a paper to a journal, you only have a limited word count. So if you read the methods of a paper, it's going to be very hard for you to replicate that because there's only so much detail they could put in. To replicate something, you need a lot of detail. There's a big push really to be both sharing the protocols, like the full protocols of these studies, and even better if you can pre-register it, which we can get onto as well. But I think it's interesting that this big issue with like I mentioned, the cancer biology studies couldn't be replicated. And a lot of times it's just because there was not enough detail given on these studies and there weren't any protocols. So that made it incredibly difficult to redo the study. And it's interesting, I saw this guidance on writing medical papers that somebody shared in my department. And at one point, the guidance was in this paper that said, how to write a medical paper. It said, the method section, focus on the sections that people read the most. People don't really read the method, so spend less time on it, which is just, for me, I thought baffling because I was thinking, yes, okay, people might find them boring, but they're essentially the most important part of the paper. How did you actually do it? So I think that's quite baffling.
Well, that puts me in mind of a recent conversation I had with Dr. Alex Freeman, who you may know is she's the inventor of a platform called Octopus, a new open research platform, and she talks a lot about narrative in research and how important narrative is, to the detriment of science sometimes. You're trying to tell a story, and that's sort of the same sort of thing. It's like, well, okay, it might be boring, but this is crucial to actually to science,
Literally,
and is that part of the problem we have culturally? I suppose this is a research culture podcast in terms of how important it's become to actually have your papers cited, etc., which isn't necessarily about the quality of the science.
No, so it's just as you mentioned, it's a culture thing, it's not a priority. And this culture is also when you're getting papers like that say, oh, don't spend too much time on the methods, it doesn't matter. So that is the culture. And it is, as you mentioned, the most important part. I don't know where I was going with that next point, but just that it is such an important part that we don't teach people to spend enough time on describing. And also, I guess, it comes back to that issue that if you have a limited word count, that might be the thing you cut. But I would always recommend that if you need to cut the method, you should be putting more detail online to a pre-registration protocol or just the full protocol somewhere, so there is more information for someone to go to.
And I don't want to put you too much on the spot, but I remember you talking, I think recently, about the challenges for yourself of actually fully documenting that methodology. It's not easy, is it? I don't think, to actually, I don't know if you come back to your own methodology and how is it sufficient?
Yes, there is stuff that you can forget. I've forgotten what exactly it was I said, but there's lots of times I think, I should have said that. Oh, that was it. It was doing a logistic regression. Sorry, a very complicated term that people don't know stats, but I was doing this regression in my study that I pre-registered, and it's actually a registered report, which you can also get onto. And it was just realizing that I didn't ever say which variables so when you have a variable, you have two levels, and one will be the reference category. And which one is the reference category does literally affect the result. And I realized I never specified that, and no one asked. And it's all this detail missing that I was like, oh, I guess actually you can manipulate that a bit and try and get like keep rerunning p-value tests. I wasn't going to, I just left it how it was, but it's that realization that there's loads of small analytic choices that are really minor and they can still affect it, that maybe you forget to even put in a protocol until you've done it.
So I mean, this perhaps brings us round quite nicely to, well, you've mentioned two terms which as I say, I've learned myself from you, but I still get a bit confused with registered reports versus pre-registration. Maybe you can give us a bit of a crash course in what pre-registration means and how that relates to registered report. Are they kind of the same thing? Are they?
So they're all the same under the umbrella. So the umbrella is pre-registration, and registered reports is a version of that. With pre-registration in general, the general term is that you've designed, say, your study protocol, your plan, so your method and analysis plan, and you put that in somewhere public and timestamped for somebody to, so someone can see that this was timestamped this date, and it's publicly available, and then you can start the study. And you can start data collection and analyze the results, and then you carry out the study how you said you're going to, based on the pre-registration. And that's meant to help with things like selective reporting or harking, which is changing hypothesis after results are known, or data dredging, or it's also termed p-hacking. So keep running statistical results until you find a significant result. And the idea is if you keep running statistical tests, eventually you'll find a p-value, a significant p-value for something eventually. And this pre-registration can help with that. So what I do is I pre-register my studies on Open Science Framework, then I start and do the study. And when I come to write up for publication, I link that pre-registration DOI into my publication, and I say I pre-registered the study, it's here. And that can also really help with lots of things, so transparency and things like that. But also be quite helpful if, say, you submit your paper to a journal and the peer reviewers say, no, I want you to do it like this instead. You could come back and say, well, I pre-registered it, I'm carrying out my plan. So it kind of backs you up to say, I'm not going to completely do a bunch of statistical tests because this is what I set out to do, and I'm not going to just keep running new tests. And also I mentioned that you put it onto a public repository. So it is a public repository, it's time-stamped. I know that some people get quite worried about scooping, which is where you put your pre-registration online and people think that someone will then do the study before you do and publish it, which I think is really unlikely. But if you are worried about that, you can embargo the pre-registration. So when the embargo lifts, and say when you've published the study, there's still the timestamp there when you originally timestamped it, but no one else could see it until the embargo was lifted. So registered report is just sort of a next step further with pre-registration, where it is pre-registration format, but it's linked to a journal. So it's a publication format. And I did it actually for my final PhD study, which is quite exciting. So I know how it works, but I can also talk about how I actually did it for my own research. So I submitted stage 1 pre-registration to a journal. So that was the first step, which is I detailed the introduction, the method, and analysis plan. So essentially half of a publication. And I submitted that to the journal. And then the peer reviewers reviewed the stage 1 register report or protocol, and they fed back on that. And the idea is basically you can get feedback on your study before you've actually started data collection and started recruitment at a vital time when you can actually make those changes. So at that time you can make those changes. And another thing is the fact that if it's accepted, then you get in principle acceptance from the journal, where the journal has committed to publishing the full study, as long as you either adhere to the protocol, or if there are any deviations, these are transparent and justified. And I think also mostly in all cases, that you should also get permission from the editors and peer reviewers to make those changes, rather than saying at the end, oh, we changed loads, but it's transparent, because you need permission for it and like a justification. So for my study, I submitted it to a journal. They gave in principle acceptance, and then I went off and did the study. I recruited participants, I analysed the data, everything I said I was going to do worked, so I didn't make any changes. So I basically followed out my plan, like a recipe. I did it quite quickly, actually. Once I had the data, I analysed it quite quickly, and I wrote up the rest of the paper. So the introduction methods couldn't change, apart from tense changes where I said, we will do this. I changed it to we did this. That was the only things I could change. And then I basically wrote the rest of the paper. So I wrote the results and the discussion. And I gave it back to the journal. And I said, look, I've done what I said I was going to do, that you already approved. And they went, yeah, that's great. And I actually you can get more feedback at this point. So there is stage 2 peer review. And they can come back more queries. I actually found that mine were happy. Yeah. And so done.
I mean, I was going to say, when you talk about pre-registration, that sounds like quite a lot of work. But effectively, it's stuff that you'd write anyway, just a different point in the process, maybe?
I would argue it's front-loading the work. So firstly, with the pre-registration, people think that's a lot of work, but I would assume for most studies you have a protocol somewhere, a plan, an ethics application. So you've got something somewhere that says what you're going to do, I would have thought. I mean, I know you could do very exploratory analyses, but you would still have an idea of what you're going to do. So you just put that in the public repository. I don't think it takes long, especially if you have, like I said, an ethics application, because you already had to detail the study. With the register report as well, it is a lot of front loading the work. For both, it is front loading the work. So it's like a recipe to follow. So once I already had it there and my supervisors were happy with it and we're ready to go, once I had recruited participants and analysed the data, it was pretty easy. I just did what I said I was going to do. So it front loads it a lot, and it can really help to know that your study is accepted while you're recruiting. It takes a lot of pressure off. So I took it back to the journal. It was accepted as I thought it would be. That took a lot of pressure off, especially when completing a PhD. I'm doing alternative thesis by publication, so that really helps. And also it really helps when you find null results, so negative results, because in research they that's a big thing that people want flashy, positive, significant results. And the big thing with registered reports is this journal is committed to publishing based off my methods and how good the methods are. So it doesn't matter if I come out and say, oh, well, the methods were good, but I found null findings, because they've already committed to publishing it. That takes a lot of pressure off if you get that scenario.
Yeah, that was something else that Alex Freeman talked about in the context of Octopus, and the fact that there's no, because everything's, that again, culturally, we're so driven by positive, well, I say positive results, but results that are finding an effect, when actually science doesn't work like that often. You could and that's perfectly valid to find.
I think it was, I'm going to quote it badly, but I think there was a study where, I can't remember the exact statistics, but it was where they found that between 5 to 10% of study outcomes or publications in traditional publication format publish null findings. But with the registered report format, it was much more around 60-70% maybe are publishing null findings.
Wow, that's a dramatic difference. But just so I'm clear then, so you talked about pre-registration and registered report. Would a registered report be public also, or that's just for the journal?
I forgot that point. Yes, that's a really good point. So when I got the stage 1 registered report, when they approved it, as soon as you approve it, they say they want it on public repository. Sure. So I uploaded that to Open Science Framework. So
exactly the same way as
the steps are really similar. It's just that actually the registered report, I had guaranteed publication, and that was any researchers out there will know that when you try and publish a study, sometimes it can take years. If one journal hangs on to it for 6 months and then says no, then it goes to another journal who hang on to it for 6 months and they say no. That's a year gone by. So for this study, my final one, that was a registered report, I got the study up and running in March. this year, and then the full study was accepted for publication in September. So it was really quick overall.
And again, on registered reports, so you mentioned that not all journals do this, though, do they? Or
No.
is it quite few and far between? Does it vary by discipline as well?
How many is it now? I think maybe 300 journals offer it in some formats. Either they always offer it or one-off specials, and might be slightly offer that. It updates quite a lot, but the vast majority are in psychology. So this was one of the few where I submitted. The British Journal of General Practice was one of the few journals that offers in medicine a registered report format. There weren't many others. Trying to think of what the others are called, but might be one or two others, or maybe more than that. But for me, I felt like there wasn't many options. So if this journal said no, there's maybe one more journal I could try, and that was kind of it. So it's a bit limiting when you work in medical and health research.
Is it growing though, do you think, or is there an awareness that it needs to grow, or is it, again, is it a cultural thing, the fact that, you know, there's not really the incentive for journals to do this?
I think it's getting there very, very slowly. Some people argue it's so slow it's not progressing enough. Well, the journal I mentioned, British Journal of General Practice, only introduced registered reports in the last couple of years. I think the incentives are complicated. I think there is incentives from the journals that there's misunderstandings of what registered reports are. So some people think it's a very positivist framework. It doesn't account for exploratory research, but there are different formats, and it can count for all types of research. So there's misunderstandings of what it is. I think there's an assumption it'll be a lot of work. And I do also know, I swear some journals have mentioned that even when they did have it, people don't submit to it, because I think there's also a culture issue that there's only so many researchers who know about it, and then so many researchers who are going to submit their study like that. So it's a mixture.
Can I just ask, with, I suppose the one thing that I'm really not clear on as well, and not a concept we haven't discussed today, but I was talking with a colleague, Dorka, I think you might know my colleague Dorka, who was doing some of the case studies, is preprint. So preprinting, how does that interact with pre-registration or registry reports in particular? Can you still preprint, or? Oh
yeah, you can still preprint. Preprint is always, it depends on the journals, what the journal says about preprint. So preprints is where you put your manuscript online. So before it's been peer reviewed by the journal, you put it online in preprint service, everyone to read. And that is fine as long as what the journal thinks preprints are. So if a journal says preprints are fine because we don't count this as prior publication, then it's fine, even for registered reports. And I would assume a journal offering for registered reports would hopefully be okay with preprints. I think any journal that's not okay with preprints, they tend to be quite outdated about what they think it is.
Yeah, I suppose I'm just trying to figure out the timeline, because if you were, I mean, might you pre-register and then preprint and then a registered report and then the formal? I mean, how would the timeline work, I suppose?
I guess in a way I pre-printed, but it was more pre-registration, stage one.
Yeah.
So I guess with stage two, it's probably, if I was going to pre-print it, I didn't actually pre-print my last study. It's because I'm considering more press release stuff, and that can be a bit more complicated with preprints.
Yeah.
But I probably, if I was going to preprint it, I would have probably done it at the stage where I submitted the stage 2 manuscript to the journal before they'd comment on it. I probably would have pre-printed it then.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's.
But it is more complicated.
I mean, there's this. Yeah, I'm just thinking out loud. So you know, and again, it's always interesting for me, not being an academic, not being a researcher, just trying to figure out.
But it is more interesting because preprint is before peer review, but then registered reports have got peer review at the stage stage. So how does it work? It is more complicated when you think about it.
Yeah. No, it just occurred to me, but no, that's great. Thank you. I mean, we've already touched on some, I think, of the barriers to open research, but do you think there are any other particular barriers? I mean, the cultural aspects, perhaps the overriding barrier, are there at the moment? Or?
Yes, I think I think two things. So it's the fact that open science was sort of born out of discussions with quantitative psychology research. So a lot of the discussions could apply to other disciplines, but I think it's basically people think it doesn't apply to them because they don't do psychology, or they don't do quantitative research, they do qualitative, or they do humanities. And I do think actually a lot of it can be applied to other disciplines. So you could, for example, pre-register qualitative research. It doesn't do the same thing as quantitative, where you're trying to reduce things like harking and p-hacking, because you don't have that in qualitative research. But there are other benefits, and it's just similar to what I said before. Actually, one of the benefits is that journals are quite restrictive on their word counts, and pre-registration is a really good place where you can kind of show in depth what you are trying to do, and you can link to this, because qualitative research also suffers from a lack of transparency. It's really hard to work out what the person did, and it could be real beneficial to actually know how people got from A to B. And it could help new qualitative researchers like train and learn by reading those papers. And maybe when you share other data, it's not the interview data, maybe it's the coding frameworks and the codes you've used and things like that, other sort of aspects of data outside of interviews that you could share, and it could really help future researchers. And I just think a lot of it needs to be discussed and reimagined from the people in those disciplines. So how it applies to humanities, it needs to be pushed by people in humanities. And I've seen there are papers coming out saying about open research in humanities, and humanity researchers are talking about it. There are going to be people, I'm not a huge amount of people, but open science is not a huge amount of people anyway.
Well, that's the point, isn't it? I mean, why, isn't it? I mean, obviously people like yourself are very passionate and enthusiastic about open science and for the good of science, I think. But do we need to do more to incentivize it? I mean, people are people. As a psychologist, why should I, as a researcher, I've got to pay the bills, I've got to publish. It's not something that's maybe incentivized enough at the moment. No,
I think it's hard, and people are already really overworked. That's why people have been striking, and it's hard to say people who already have a lot on their plate, you have to learn all these new skills. I think it has to be introduced really early into education, such as masters, but if it could, even better if it's undergraduate. And the earlier it's introduced, the better. So I started learning about this in my masters and continued into my PhD, but it got a lot harder to keep up with the latest things in open science and research during the last year of my PhD. It gets harder, and the skills and techniques I learned, it was easier at the beginning. And again, it will be easier again if we teach the undergrad students and the masters, but that comes to a complicated issue. Who's going to teach them?
Yeah, well, that's the subject of another podcast I'm hoping to do with a colleague, Dr. Maddie Pownell.
Yes.
So
that's going to be really interesting.
So yeah, we're yet to speak to Maddie, but very interested in some of the work that she's doing.
She's doing amazing work,
trying to embed some of this stuff in the undergraduate curriculum, because they are, of course, the researchers of tomorrow.
Yes, 100%. But then it comes to a complicated thing of Maddie's doing amazing work in psychology, but we need to push it through in other disciplines.
Yeah, who's going to do the psychologist?
But who's going to do it in humanities? Yeah. Because you need each person who understands the language of that discipline to train in it, because there's no point me coming into humanities and talking about it because I don't understand humanities. Yeah.
And then, I was talking to another colleague recently about that, and the fact that maybe humanities scholars feel like it's been foisted on them from the STEM disciplines.
That's never what you want. It needs to be, in an ideal world, and this is so much harder to actually do, it needs to be coming from the people, like the leaders and the early career researchers in those disciplines, who are going to reimagine what open research is for their own disciplines in an ideal world. But then it's that culture as well. Someone in humanities might feel like it's just STEM coming in trying to say how to do our research, and that's not pleasant. And those can be a lot of barriers, the culture barriers to open research is how people perceive it. So I don't know how much you've seen on Twitter, but there's also a big barrier that people don't like tends to be more open science, because there can be a bullying culture with it. With a lot of
so-called broken
science. I really recommend people listen to the podcast to read the Broken Science piece by Kirsty Whittaker and Olivia Guest.
Yeah, I'll put the links in the show notes.
Really, really good paper. I think it's a blog post, but it's really, really good. And that's a really big issue. So I've seen it where
gatekeepers, isn't like anything,
gatekeepers.
but there's academic gatekeepers, or now there's and it can be gendered, and
broken science, as Kirsty and Olivia are discussing, you don't have to be a bro or a man. But in all honesty, it does tend to often be white men who are in positions of power already, bullying people when they say this study is rubbish, and they critique it, and they're really mean on Twitter. And that often is to an early career researcher. And so that's what people's perception is of open science. If you saw that, why would you want to engage in those discussions? This doesn't put me off it, because it doesn't put me off open science because I don't want to be pushed out. I'd rather keep us all in and try and reimagine it.
Can I ask if you've experienced?
No, I haven't actually.
Did you say, or do you have any colleagues that have experience?
I haven't experienced it. I'm not sure if colleagues have, but it is kind of my worst nightmare to put something out there and everyone on Twitter just rip into it, and I think I'd cry. So when it happens to other people, I really feel for them, and I'm really scared of it happening to me, which also means that you won't want to share I do want to share my data and everything, but the more you share, the more you open yourself up to criticism, and that's really scary. And
whether Twitter's the best medium, especially now, is another question.
That is another question. So that can be really scary, and I think it's just, again, reimagining it. So I'm really proud of a paper that I wrote with Maddie. She was the leader or author on it, about sort of the perspectives of open science as feminist early career researchers, and sort of our discussion on what the barriers can be and how you can sort of reimagine open science. And that's what I think we need, rather than letting these broken people take it over.
That cuts across culture as well, doesn't it?
Yes.
It's not just about
it's culture.
It's about the culture of the academy and gender disparity, pay, and all sorts of other things.
Science and research is just on the existing academic structure, which are already just already favouring like Western, like white men and everything. It's already built on those existing power imbalances.
No, there's lots of interesting discussion about that, and I hope to cover that in the discussion in the podcast. But I suppose let you go soon, but not that actually as you said, you've now submitted your thesis, so we don't need to worry too much.
I've got an application when I get in, but yes.
But in terms of, we've already touched a little bit on how we can support and promote the adoption of open research practices. And we talked earlier about reproducibility, which is a big part of that, I think. Can you tell us a bit about reproducibility, your role in it? And I've certainly learned a lot from attending reproducibility sessions, both here and at other universities. So what is it and how does it work?
So Reproducibility is a journal club that originally started at Oxford, University of Oxford, by early career researchers who were quite interested in open science, and they really felt that they needed this sort of community to discuss papers in this area. And it's expanded since then. So it's gone to, this is probably outdated statistics, but it's spread to over 140 institutes in over 27 different countries. And we have one in Leeds. So it started in 2018. I was one of the first groups as well that started it here. And we have breaks. So we're on a break at the moment because I need to finish my PhD. But when we're up and running, we have a meeting every month virtually where we assign a topic or a paper, but you don't have to read the paper. If you want to read the paper, great, but we will summarize the paper as well. And sometimes we have guest speakers on an open research topic, and then we have room for discussion. So we've had previous sessions on qualitative pre-registration, and we had a guest speaker, and we've had them on preprints, the controversies in preprints. So there was a lot of controversies with COVID and people putting preprints online that apparently people said they weren't very good studies, they wouldn't have passed peer review. It's hard to know because a lot of bad studies get through peer review, but that's kind of the discussion. The origins of open science. We've done qualitative data sharing. We've done stuff on more quantitative stuff like R, programming, and so many different things. We've tried to make it so it's inclusive to loads of different disciplines, and try and do discipline specific things as well. We had a geography session and we had a open science researcher from geography. I don't know anything about geography, but that's really interesting. And try and have things over different disciplines and have multidisciplinary discussions. And as I said, it's informal, about maybe 20 minutes, 30 minutes of presentations, and the rest is just informal discussions, questions in the chat, put your hand up, or we can all just have a chat and see how we feel, what our opinions are. So you can learn a lot from it, really, I think.
Yeah, well, I would certainly vouch for that. I mean, I've been along, and I've, a lot of what I've learned in my role is from the ReproducibiliTea session. And you just encourage people to come along once they see them advertised, won't they, on Twitter and
there's you don't have to
teams.
You don't have to speak or ask a question. And like I said, if you don't have to ask a question, that's fine. You can listen to the discussion. If you have a question but you're a bit shy, just put it in the group chat and I'll read it out. It'll be fine. And everyone can sort of have a nice time. Actually, on that note, they're on a break at the moment, but we're hoping to get back started up in February. So do check it out. But also, if you're interested in helping out, please drop me an email. I don't know if you could put my email.
Yeah, I'll put contact details, maybe even Twitter as well if you have to. I'll discuss that with you if you want to. But and put links. And
we're always looking for volunteers, early career researchers. I think it's a great thing for the CV as well, because open research is becoming more and more important. So if you want to help out running sessions, please let me know. And
we just emphasise, don't we, I think the value of community. I mean, as I say, I met you through ReproducibiliTea. I've learned an awful lot from you on open research, maybe even you from the library as well.
Oh, I have,
in terms of, and that's the collaborative nature of open.
There's lots of things I didn't know. The licensing, like Creative Commons license, no idea about that. Really important. Data sharing, there's a lot I didn't know that I learned from the library.
Well, and that's the way I always put it is talk about the fact that the nature of open research and open science is about collaboration.
Yes,
and we can all achieve a lot more through collaboration and community. So I strongly encourage people to join the ReproducibiliTea Journal Club. Yeah,
it is a great way to start with the community. I mean, there's open lunch as well, your sessions, which are really good. I guess ReproducibiliTea is it's a smaller, more informal discussion. That'd be quite good if you want to really get to know people.
Yeah. Might we ever do it in person again? You said it's virtual because prior to the pandemic, we did.
I should probably set up a hybrid one. It is on my to-do list. I'm just not very good with technology. So this could go very horribly wrong.
And we do have a teapot, of course. Still got the teapot. It's just sat in the cupboard from.
I know. I need to set up a hybrid one, but I'm terrified of the tech side of trying to do both.
No, that's fair enough. No, that's so. As I say, just to reiterate that, really encourage people to join ReproducibiliTea. But thank you very much, Kelly. I suppose the just before I let you go, and what's next for you now that you have finished your PhD and assuming you get through your viva, and no doubt that you will. And what's next? Are you staying at Leeds?
Yes, I have a job interview on Thursday, so for a job in my department, and I'm also writing an ESRC fellowship application for 1 year of funding they provide to people who just finished their PhD. So hopefully, if it all goes well in the interview, I'll still be around next year.
Okay, and continue to work with you on open science and open research. So thank you very much. And,
thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. See you again. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to the Research Culture Uncovered podcast. Please subscribe so you never miss out on our brand new episodes. And if you're enjoying the discussions, give us some love by dropping a 5-star rating and written review, as it helps other research culturists find us. And please share with a friend and show them how to subscribe. Email us at academicdev@leeds.ac.uk. Thanks for listening, and here's to you and your research culture.